You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Hi, I'm Maria Varmazes, and I'm the host of T-Minus, the only daily podcast for the space industry. Every weekday, I'll be covering the latest news in space technology, business, and governance by talking with the people who are forging the path in this new space era. If you're a space professional looking to separate the signal from the noise and stay current on what's happening, this show is for you. Join me every day for T-Minus, the daily space industry podcast. Listen on all major podcast platforms or visit space.n2k.com. That's space.n2k.com.
And that's partly where the name Lazarus comes from. Just when you think you've wiped them out, they come back. They're very, very clever in evading escape because they've been doing it for decades.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Hacking Humans podcast, where each week we look behind the social engineering scams, the phishing schemes, and criminal exploits that are making headlines and taking a heavy toll on organizations around the world. I'm Dave Bittner, and joining me is Joe Kerrigan from Harbor Labs and the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
We've got some good stories to share this week. And later in the show, I speak with Gene Lee, Public Policy Fellow at the Wilson Center, and author and journalist Geoff White. They're bringing us a preview of Season 2 of their podcast, The Lazarus Heist. But first, a word from our sponsors at KnowBe4. We're not talking conspiracy theory when we say it's all connected. When it comes to InfoSec tools, effective integrations can make or break your security stack. Though not as common, the same should be true for security awareness training. Not only does KnowBe4 deliver the world's largest library of security awareness training, but they also provide a way to integrate the various elements of your existing security stack to help you strengthen your organization's security culture. Stay with us, and in a few minutes, we'll hear from our sponsors at KnowBe4 about how you can integrate security awareness with your tech stack like never before. All right, Joe, let's jump right into our stories this week. You want to start things off for us here?
Yeah, Dave, no AI story for me this week.
Okay.
But I will say that there are multiple stories out there about generative AIs being used in kidnapping scams.
Oh.
So you can just Google that and look at it. I don't know how we defend against this. But
yeah.
I'm going to move on to some regular old social engineering stories.
Okay.
And this one comes from Lauren Jackson at WBRC. I always want to say WBRB because it sounds like I'll be right back, but it's WBRC.
Okay.
This is a story about a scam that has been running around local businesses in the area, and it is, here's what happens. Here's how this works. Somebody calls in to a tire shop. That's who's getting targeted this time.
Okay.
And they order tires, like $20,000 worth of tires.
As you do.
As you do.
It's some nice tires.
Right.
Don't get caught in the snow with those tires, Joe.
You'll be able to roll over everything.
Yeah.
With this. Then they say, hold on, I got a bunch of credit cards I have to try to pay with this because I'm going through some financial stuff right now. So let me just start running through some credit cards. And of course, the person on the other end is entering credit card information. Some of them get approved for $1,000. Some of them get declined. And then before everything's over, they've paid for $20,000 in tires, and then they send somebody to go pick up the tires.
Huh.
Right? This guy goes and picks up the tires, and then all the credit cards get charged back because somebody goes, I didn't order $1,000 worth of tires. I live in Wisconsin. Why are these tires on my credit card?
Okay.
So I put the story in here. This is a short story. It's just an obvious chargeback scam. Somebody's going to get some free tires or $20,000 worth of free tires.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that stuck out to me is this operation requires that they have tire mules.
Mm-hmm.
Mules who specifically go around and pick up tires from places.
Yeah.
And then they have to fence these tires.
Mm-hmm.
It's the standard stolen goods scheme.
Right.
with a different angle.
Seems to me like it wouldn't be hard to find somebody with a pickup truck or a van and pay them, whatever, $100.
They can just go rent a U-Haul.
Well, yeah, right.
Put them all in there.
Pick up the tires and then take them to whatever place, a storage unit or something where they fence the stolen tires.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of work, but I guess
it does seem like a lot
it's working.
Of work. But people are making money. I mean, if you get free tires and you could turn around and sell them for half their cost, you got $20,000 worth of tires. In a day, you've made $10,000.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Not bad work if you can get it.
No, you'd think that this would raise red flags with the tire companies, the retailers. If somebody's playing, opens up a bunch of credit cards, like fanning them like they're playing poker,
Yeah.
Right?
I think that what happens is there's a salesperson who's going, ooh, I'm going to get a big commission on this one.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're willing to do whatever they have to do. I think, but that would strike a red flag in my head or put up a red flag in my head.
Absolutely.
My second story comes from David Sentendrey at KDFW from one of my favorite places in the world, the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Okay.
And it's a good news, bad news story. The first part is going to be bad news, and it's about a 70-year-old widow who in 2019 was scammed out of $75,000 in a romance scam.
Oh.
She is now telling her stories because she doesn't want other people to fall victim. And this is a great quote from her in the article. They're not naming her in the article, which is also good.
Yeah.
It's great that she's coming forward, though. But she says, I fell for it. It's embarrassing. I'm not a stupid person, but believe me, they've got their act together. So I believe that this woman is not stupid.
Yeah.
And honestly fell for a romance scam. When you hear how this thing works, it's or what's going on here, it kind of makes sense. The scammers were ready for her. They had all kinds of documentation, make things seem legit. And then the people who communicated with her, or the person who communicated with her, I don't know if it was one or more people, they convinced her that they had a big business deal in the making, but they needed a loan to make it through to when the business deal came through. Now, they were so convincing, she had her church group praying for the success of this business deal.
Oh, wow.
All right. So that's, I think that's convincing. So she was talking to other people about it, and it didn't set off any red flags with them either. But she was sending numerous packages containing cash to different addresses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and someone at the UPS store that she was using said, something's going on here. And they called the police.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
So law enforcement then got involved, and law enforcement found out that there was a ring of about 4 people in the DFW that were handling the money and laundering it. They were calling themselves the Yahoo Boys.
Okay.
Very clever name.
Yeah.
I don't know why they called themselves the Yahoo Boys. Maybe they just opened up massive amounts of Yahoo accounts.
Yeah.
I don't get this.
Although Yahoo is kind of a Texas thing to say, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Yeehaw, more so.
True.
Yeah. Being someone who goes to Texas quite frequently, is the owner of not one but 2 cowboy hats, eyeing a third, by the way. Yes, I'll say that. So this ring of 4 people, of the 4 people they've identified in this group of people, one of them, a Mr. Obi, I have no hope of ever properly pronouncing his first name, so I won't attempt it. But he has now been sentenced to 20 years in prison.
Wow.
I don't know if this is federal prison or Texas prison. I don't know what Texas jurisprudence is, if it's like federal prison. Like when you get sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, you're going to be put away for about 20 years.
Yeah.
You don't get time off for good behavior. There's no parole, none of that. That's what you're going to do. I don't know what it's like in Texas. Texas is a state court. And I don't even know which system this guy was sentenced in. The article doesn't mention that. But here's what's interesting about him. He moved, during the 2 months they were watching him, $1.3 million to Nigeria. So he was obviously the money mule, and they nabbed him for fraud and money laundering. And he was taking delivery of these packages and somehow getting that money over to Nigeria and Turkey and one other place that I can't remember from reading the article. But he was sending money all over the world, and now he's going to be the guest of some legal system for the next 20 years. Prosecutors are still working on cases for the other 3 people that are not named in the article because they haven't been convicted. But My guess is they're also going to be convicted or hit a plea deal or something.
And no word in this article whether this victim, the 70-year-old widow, has any chance of getting any of her money back.
Probably not. There is no word in the article about that.
Yeah.
Being that it's from 2019 and here we are 4 years later, she's probably not going to get that money back.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. All right. Interesting stuff. Well, it is good news that at least somebody's being brought to justice here.
Yes, indeed.
So.
That's the good news part of the good news, bad news equation here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, my story this week comes from the folks over at 9 News. This is in Colorado, one of the local affiliates there. This is an NBC affiliate.
Okay.
And this is the story of – this is a weird one, Joe.
Okay.
This is a story of a heist that took place at a casino in Black Hawk, Colorado. It's a Monarch casino.
A heist.
A heist, sort of. So 1:45 in the morning in March, a cashier named Sabrina Eddy, 44 years old, she went to the casino's vault, and she was a cashier at the casino, so
right.
She was authorized to be in the vault. She goes to the vault, and she was videotaped reaching into the vault and grabbing bricks of $50,000 each.
Okay.
She put the bricks in a bag. She went out to her car, put the money in the car, drove off, came back a little while later, went back to the cage, to the vault, got some more money, went back to her car, drove away.
So she was able to do this twice?
She was able to do this twice. She took $500,000.
Huh.
Okay. Which, $50,000 bricks, 10 bricks.
Right.
That's a
It seems to me like
bag.
a small take for grabbing $50,000 bricks.
So this is where it gets weird.
Okay.
She calls the casino after a little while. She explains to the casino that while she was on her shift, she'd received a phone call on the casino's phone
right.
from a man claiming to be the casino's head of operations.
Okay.
He and another man, who claimed to be the cage manager, told her that the casino was having a problem with a UPS order and they needed the money or the casino would be in some sort of breach of contract. And that they asked her to take the funds to a lawyer. She took the funds to a local hospital. They say it's a place called St. Anthony's Hospital.
Okay.
Where a man met her and took the money. After that is when I think maybe it dawned on her that something was up. And that's when she called the casino back. She said, I'm coming back. And she said she told the casino she'd taken the money off property and she thought she might be arrested. Which is indeed what happened. She goes back to the casino. She gets arrested. As far as I know, she is still in jail.
Right.
She did not have the means to post bond. The local prosecutor was okay with her having bail with just her personal guarantee.
Right, on recognizance.
On her recognizance, thank you. And the judge actually said, no, $500,000 is too large an amount of money to be involved here to do that. I'm curious what your take on this, Joe, is, and then I'll share my thoughts, which I suspect probably align with yours. But
right.
What do you think's going on here?
Well, there's two things that could be going on.
Yeah.
One of them is that she is just stealing money from the casino and using this as a cover-up. She has an accomplice on the outside that's holding the money. That she's actually stolen $500,000 from a casino.
Right.
The other possibility is that this is what she says it is.
Yeah.
And that is that somebody called her up impersonating the management they said they were. I don't know. Does it say in the article whether or not they sounded like the people on the phone? Or does she know them?
No, it doesn't say, but it does say that she did try to call them back and that she couldn't, no one answered, couldn't get back through to them. So
okay.
I suspect they were probably burner phones, but who knows?
Correct. If it did happen that way, yeah. There are ways you can find out. Did calls come in? I mean, can you even find those records?
Certainly on her end, you could.
Yeah. Are the calls recorded coming into the casino?
Oh. You'd think probably that would be certainly plausible that would
Right.
be a security thing.
Check that out. See if those calls exist and if the recordings of those calls exist.
Yeah.
Also, if it was a heist, if she was the one stealing the money, I don't know that she would be going back and saying, look what happened.
Right.
Where's the benefit in that for her? It's best for her to take the $500,000 and leave.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense to me. I kind of tend to think that what she's saying is probably true.
Yeah.
Especially since the prosecutor was willing to let her go on her own recognizance.
Right.
Does she have a defense attorney?
Well, if she doesn't, one will be assigned to her.
Right. I hope that she has. I hope that she has the attorney and has utilized the attorney before talking to anybody.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. This is a tough one. I kind of lean towards the fact that she might be a scam victim here.
Yeah. That's just certainly my first impulse, that she just found herself the victim of this, that somebody was very convincing and she did what she thought she was being asked to do. I will say I had not considered what you brought up, which is that it's possible that she could have been using the story of social engineering to cover her tracks.
Right.
And in that case, go on with her life.
Yes.
You know, she doesn't have to pick up and be on the run, and she could just, as you say, if she had an accomplice, she could say, hey, well, we'll just say that this happened. That's an interesting possibility. I guess, you know, I tend to give her the benefit of the doubt because it's probably the better thing to do as a human being.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I think that I don't know that she's guilty. I wouldn't immediately assume that of her in this case.
No, and then obviously, of course, she is due the presumption of innocence until proven otherwise.
Well, I mean, legally she's due that presumption, and I would insist that be the case. But you know, when you think about these things, when you hear the word allegedly,
right?
Like in our interview today, they use the word alleged hacking from North Korea a lot.
Yeah,
I don't know how alleged that is, but
right.
You know, but in this case, I would be much more inclined to believe this person is the victim of something than she would be in on it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, 2 weeks ago we had Keith Houston on, who's now a prosecutor in Texas. But he started in a casino, and one of the things he said was that they have procedures in casinos, and it's easy to tell when someone's deviating from the procedure.
Right.
So I assume that everybody that works in a casino, especially everyone that handles the cash, is rigorously trained in what the procedures are.
Yeah.
Which is why I one of my possibilities here is that she's in on it, because it seems like one of the things that you would say is nobody is ever going to ask you to take money off premises unless they're coming in an armored car.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because you don't just take $500,000 out of a casino.
No. That is one of the things that strikes me as being odd, that you, as you say, there would be very strict procedures for everything having to do with handling money. It also strikes me as odd that she would do all of this without interacting with anyone else in person at the casino.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, we know that these social engineering folks can be very convincing.
Very persuasive.
And they can explain that stuff away.
Yep.
They could say, you know, listen, as your boss, I just want you to know that this is really embarrassing for me. You're really saving me. Just don't mention this to anybody, because, you know, this is just embarrassing for me. And you don't want to embarrass your boss.
Right.
For example.
Yes.
So, I don't know. I mean, I hope that she's innocent here, I guess, because first of all, I'd hate to see someone who was innocent end up in big trouble for falling victim to something like this.
Right.
Despite the fact that she did violate clearly some policies, and she took $500,000 off premises and it got stolen. So she bears a certain amount of responsibility for her actions. But whether or not she was in on it, I guess that's for the prosecutors to determine. Yeah. Weird. It's a weird one, isn't it?
It is. It's strange.
Yeah.
That's a really weird combination of things. I mean, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how this one plays out.
Yeah. I before we recorded today, I went and looked to see if there were any updates, and the only thing I found was that she'd been denied bail. So I'll try to keep an eye on it. All right, we will have a link to that story in the show notes, and of course, we would love to hear from all of you. You can email us at hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com. Joe, it is time to move on to our catch of the day.
Our catch of the day comes from Morten, who writes, Dear Dave and Joe, I found the following catch of the day quite amusing and yet troublesome. I can't seem to figure out how the scammer is gaining any valuable leverage towards scamming me. To the contrary, it seems like the scammer is trying to protect me from being scammed. I think Morten is writing here very tongue-in-cheek.
Okay.
So it's a beneficiary scam, Dave, and it begins down at the bottom of it. And I love the first line after Dear Beneficiary.
It goes like this. Dear beneficiary, are you alive or dead?
See, he's very concerned about Morten's well-being.
How would they respond if they were dead?
Right.
We received several emails from one Mr. Garcia Charles Gilbert, who narrated to us about the auto accident you had 2 weeks ago. Mr. Garcia made us understand that you are in hospital for treatment, but there is no hope for your recovery. He stated that he is your business associate, also your next of kin, whom you have chosen and permitted to inherit all your properties. He is contacting this office based on your contract, inheritance payment fund, which is about to be paid to you. He requested that the payment should now be transferred into his own personal account. We request your immediate confirmation before we can process this transfer to Mr. Garcia Charles Gilbert's bank account. This is to avoid releasing your money to the wrong person, because Mr. Garcia Charles Gilbert is too eager and ready to follow every instruction to have this money into his account. If you do not have an auto accident and you did not permit Mr. Garcia Charles Gilbert to claim your money, kindly reply to this message with your full contact information so we can process the release of your fund to you. Best regard, Samuel Muth, Chief Executive Officer, World Bank. And then it says, this email is confidential and is intended solely for the use of the individual or entity to whom they are addressed and not binding any agreement on behalf of the department.
I love the disclaimer at the end of it. Makes it seem more legit.
Sure.
This is just an advanced fee scam. It's trying to create a sense of urgency with the fact that you might lose the money and have somebody else, Mr. Garcia Charles Gilbert.
Right.
Who names their kid Garcia Charles Gilbert?
I don't know. I love that every time they mention him, they use his full name.
Full name.
Yeah.
Mr. Garcia Charles Gilbert.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hilarious.
It is.
And
it is.
We're going to see fewer and fewer of these as AI continues to generate these things.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to miss these, Dave. I'm really going to miss them.
Okay. We're in the golden age of poorly worded social engineering scams.
We're in the twilight of that.
At least for comedic purposes.
Yes. It's going away. Mm-hmm. And soon they'll all be masterfully worded, AI genius written.
That's right.
Pieces of art. And
that's right.
We'll have to find other ways to laugh at them.
Yeah.
But don't worry. I'm pretty sure we'll find other ways.
Yeah. All right. Well, our thanks to Morten for sending that in to us. And again, we would love to hear from you. If you have something you'd like us to consider for our catch of the day, you can email us. It's hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com. Back to the concept of integrations. KnowBe4's Security Coach uses standard APIs to quickly and easily integrate with your existing security products from vendors like Microsoft, CrowdStrike, Cisco, and dozens of others. Security Coach analyzes alerts your security stack generates to identify events related to any risky security behavior from your users. With this information, you can set up real-time coaching campaigns to target risky users based on those events from your network, endpoint, identity, or web security vendors. These campaigns enable you to coach your users at the moment the risky behavior occurs, with contextual security tips delivered via Microsoft Teams, Slack, or email. With 35 integrations and counting, Security Coach delivers the insight you need to improve your organization's security culture. Learn more about Security Coach at knowbefore.com/securitycoach. That's knowbefore.com/securitycoach. Joe, I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Jean Lee. She is Public Policy Fellow at the Wilson Center and also author and journalist Geoff White. They are the co-hosts of the podcast The Lazarus Heist, which, of course, very popular on the BBC over a year ago now, I suppose.
Yes.
And they have just launched season 2, and we're going to talk about that. So here's my conversation with Jean Lee and Geoff White.
Yeah, so season 1 of The Lazarus Heist dealt with this computer hacking group called the Lazarus Group, who are suspected of working on behalf of the government of North Korea. They have a long and illustrious hacking career and be accused of breaking into, among others, Sony Pictures Entertainment and Bangladesh Bank, the National Bank of Bangladesh, and also unleashing the WannaCry ransomware virus, which went around the world in 2017. And season 2 of the podcast continues the story onwards. The Lazarus Group haven't stood still. They've done even more hacks, gone after even bigger targets, and are now suspected of having stolen something like $3.2 billion worth of cryptocurrency. So seasons 1 and 2 kind of cover the whole story, and it is a story that's still ongoing.
Jean, as season 1 wrapped up and certainly received a lot of notice and good reviews, how did you go into the planning of the second season, of deciding what exactly it was you were going to cover?
You know, it's interesting because we made season 1 at a time when North Korea was pretty quiet. And they had gone sort of into retreat after diplomacy had failed. And it wasn't really on people's radars. But since then, in the course of making season 2, North Korea has just gone on a rampage when it comes to weapons testing. And so it did, I think, help shape part of the narrative, which is to try to make that link between cybercrime and these cyber attacks and where that money is going. So, season 1, we went into the history of North Korea's alleged illicit money making, going into the past, the making of superdollars, making of methamphetamines, some of these crazy capers. But what we do now is bring it up to the present and to also provide some of that context. Why are these hackers working on behalf of the state? They're not just individuals working on their own. They're young men assigned to work for their country. What do we need to know about North Korea to understand who they are? We did in season 1 get into how they get their training, but we needed to update listeners on where that training has taken them. So in season 2, we just take the narrative forward, but also really step back and look at the context. Why is North Korea doing this? Where is that money going, and what should we be afraid of?
It strikes me that North Korea kind of stands alone on the global stage here, the degree to which they're isolated. Is it fair to say that most of their hacking is just to kind of keep the doors open and the lights on?
So that, I think, is part of the reason the world has underestimated North Korea's cyber capabilities, is because they are so isolated. It is a country that is largely cut off from the internet. And so it's hard for us to imagine that they could produce such aggressive hackers. But that's partly what we explore. But I think that also gives them even more incentive, right? They're so isolated financially, economically, and politically, diplomatically, that they're looking for those gray areas, those gray zones where they can get the money that they need, like you said, to keep the lights on. It's more than just keeping the lights on, but that is a big part of it. And so that's part of the investigation, is for us to kind of connect the dots and make sure that we're drawing a line between the hacking and where that money goes.
Geoff, can we dig into some of the stories that you're going to share this season in the show?
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, North Korea and the Lazarus Group hackers according to the accusations against them, haven't stood still. I mean, some of the hacks that we're covering are absolutely astonishing. One of the things we kick off with in season 2 is a raid on an Indian bank called Cosmos Cooperative Bank. It's back in 2018. The hackers broke into the bank, and the way they got in, as your listeners I'm sure will be aware, is fairly standard procedure. They sent phishing emails to employees of the bank, and one of the employees, it seems, fell for those phishing emails, downloaded the hackers' viruses and allowed them in. What they did next, though, was to navigate their way around the bank and get to the ATM approval software. So basically any withdrawal of cash anywhere around the world using a Cosmos bank card comes into Cosmos Bank, obviously. And so the hackers were then sitting on those communications and could see any withdrawals for any cash anywhere around the world coming into Cosmos Bank. And the hackers could then approve them and authorize them. Now, that's a pretty good position to be in, but for the hackers, it presented a problem. They've got a great bit of access there, but they've somehow got to utilize it. And to do that, they need two things. They need a bunch of Cosmos bank cards, because you've got to take them to a cash point and use them. And to do this around the world, they need accomplices out on the street with those cash cards to take them to ATMs and make the withdrawals. So what the North Koreans are accused of doing is reaching out, we think through the dark web, for accomplices in various countries, issuing them with bank details that they could then use to create fake bank cards that were linked to real accounts at Cosmos Co-op Bank, and then take those cash cards to ATMs and withdraw money. And they did this during a crime spree which lasted 2 hours and 13 minutes, during which they managed to get, astonishingly, nearly $14 million out of cash points before Cosmos Bank and its partners caught up with them and closed the loophole. So you've got people running around in 28 different countries with wads of cash they've withdrawn from cash points because of the access that Lazarus Group's accused of getting to Cosmos Co-op Bank. It's absolutely astonishing crime spree, a sort of flash mob of cybercrime, if you like. So that's one of the most sort of remarkable stories that we kicked off with in season 2.
Okay, Geoff, don't give away too much.
Well, it's a really interesting insight. I mean, does the Lazarus Group tend to be episodic with their capers? Do they lay low for a while and then, as you say, in 2 hours, do essentially an ATM smash and grab?
My sense is that they're constantly working, looking at their different jobs and when they do them. There's barely a year goes by where they don't have some major operation on the go. And the other thing about this is, we see the results of this. We see that 2 hour, 13-minute window during which they made these thousands of withdrawals. What we don't see, of course, is the months and months of preparation that goes into that. I mean, those phishing emails that hit Cosmos, they were arriving at the bank for months previously. And then even before they send the phishing emails, they've got to do a bit of reconnaissance about Cosmos Bank, get the employees' email addresses and so on. So I just get the feeling there's this rolling campaign of researching targets, working out who to hit, working out how to hit them, getting the tools and the bits in place, the pieces in place to carry out those hacks. So it does seem to be a kind of ongoing campaign, and it's getting bigger and more aggressive all the time from where I'm sitting.
These are, if I can jump in, these are military missions. These are very carefully calculated, plotted over many, many months, as Geoff said, and planned well in advance. And so if we look at it that way, and that's why I think it's so important for us to provide the context and background when it comes to the North Korean alleged hacking, so that we understand that these are military missions that are not done. It's not just an individual working in their basement. They're carrying out a mission as a unit. So I think that is helpful for understanding the intricate nature, the careful planning, the orchestration. But what Geoff's talking about as well is the incorporation of their overseas networks and all these middlemen. And we went into that in season 1, and we just go into it in different regions of the world, actually, in season 2. But it's helpful, I think, in understanding how they physically carry out these thefts after they launch that malware.
Now, Jean, it's my understanding that you have the unique privilege or position of having actually spent time in North Korea. What perspective has that provided you with? For our listeners, are there things that you think we should know about North Korean life, about the mindset there that informs this type of activity?
Yeah, where do I begin? It's very unusual as an American in particular to have that opportunity. And it was a difficult assignment as you can imagine. But it was very hard to do reporting. For me, the most valuable thing, though, was just being there on the ground. So unlike other foreign journalists, I wasn't just brought there by the government on a 2 or 3 day junket, but I was there for weeks on end, working and living with my North Korean staff. And so you get to see a different side of the country. What we get in their state media is propaganda, right? The prettiest pictures that they want us to see, those images of strength. But I saw the other side, which I think is important. I saw how poor it was. I felt how cold it was. I struggled with my own health. I struggled with the surveillance. So you have a sense of the difficulty of life, the kind of repression that they live under, the lack of freedom of choice and of movement that they have, and also the system of rewards that are granted. So I hope that I bring all of that into our understanding of why and how these young men are working on behalf of the North Korean state, and also to provide some of that color so that we understand just how desperate they are and how that shapes their motivation. And also I just want to bring that country to life, because so much of what we do when we talk about cyber is hidden from us. So whatever I can do to make it feel real, like this is a real place, these are real people who are doing this in many circumstances under duress. I hope that I bring that to our listeners, and so that it doesn't feel like it's just this mythical place off in a country we can't get to. So I serve as a proxy in a way for the North Koreans who don't have a voice, and I try to bring some of that color into the podcast.
That's a really interesting insight, and I think it's hard for us to understand, as you say, particularly perhaps as Americans here, as far away as we are and as isolated as they are. I'm curious, when it comes to international law enforcement, what have you learned in terms of how they regard these actors? How, I suppose, well, would it be fair to say that you underestimate them at your own peril?
We underestimate the North Koreans at our own peril, definitely. Now, when it comes to international law, what I've learned is that the North Koreans don't feel beholden to any international law. They only feel beholden to their own country's law. And so that means that they feel that they are not necessarily a part of the world, that they only care about any repercussion or punishment that they may face from their own government, and their government has a global reach. I do think that the FBI takes the North Korean, or the alleged North Korean hackers, very seriously. So a lot of the information that we get is from that U.S. chase. And a lot of the information we get is from U.S. indictments. However, the North Koreans are always one step ahead. They're very good at evading U.S. authorities. And until you have the cooperation of many of these other countries in that global network, the North Koreans' overseas network, it's going to be very hard to really catch them. And so, I do see this as a cat and mouse game. Somebody else called it recently whack-a-mole, and that's partly where the name Lazarus comes from. Just when you think you've wiped them out, they come back. They're very, very hard, very clever, very hard to capture, very clever in evading escape, because they've been doing it for decades. And in terms of whether we take them seriously, I hope that our podcast is drawing attention. I think that cyber can sometimes be a bit of a blind spot because it's so hard to comprehend. And so with this podcast, we try, Geoff knows all of this stuff inside and out, but I'm not a cyber expert. And so, and many of the experts in my field just sort of, their minds go blank because it's hard to comprehend. So I hope in a way that we break it down to a level that anyone can understand, that we scare them to a certain degree and draw more attention to the threat that this poses. And I do think it has actually, after season 1, drawn attention to the North Koreans and their cyber campaign. And I do think that it's actually brought both the South Korean and the U.S. governments together to try to work collaboratively on coming up with some strategies on how to stop them.
And just to add a point on that, I think it's interesting that the North Koreans' activity, certainly according to the accusations against it, has got more global reach, which has given them both advantages and disadvantages. One of the things hackers from North Korea, and indeed lots of cybercrime groups, have is what you might call sort of international deniability. So you can try and hack organizations in lots of different countries. And what that presents law enforcement locally with is a challenge. You hack a bank in Bangladesh, you move the money through New York, the Philippines, into Macau. Suddenly you've got 4 jurisdictions you're working with. Now, can all of those police forces in all those jurisdictions work together? Can they swap information? Yes, eventually, but nowhere near as fast as the hackers can work. So they've got this sort of international arbitrage that they're doing in terms of cybercrime. But conversely, the more international these campaigns get, the more they sort of trip over the tripwires in different countries. So, for example, the US government, if you move money through the US in any type of cybercrime, the US government has the ability to go after you because suddenly you've committed a crime in the US. You've used its financial system. So suddenly the US radar perks up as soon as you trip over those tripwires. And so the more international you get, the more brazen you get, the better you can get away with it in terms of playing countries off against each other, but the more likely you are to trip across a particular country's tripwire and get them interested in you. So again, the cat and mouse analogy, I think, is a really interesting one from that perspective.
And I'll just make one more point, which is that the UN Security Council has been trying to stop the flow of money into North Korea's weapons program with some of the toughest sanctions we've ever seen. But unless those sanctions are enforced by member nations, they're not particularly effective. And right now we're in the middle of a global divide heightened, I would say, by the war in Ukraine and the tensions between the U.S. and China. And so it's very hard to get it's very hard to get China and Russia on board with new sanctions. And it's very difficult because of attribution issues to really target cyber. So the North Koreans have figured out that it's just incredibly difficult for countries to stop them. They're taking advantage of a vulnerability or a gray area. And it's both impressive and frightening.
All right, Joe, what do you think?
I had to look this up, Dave, but I always get Geoff White and Jamie Bartlett mixed up in my head.
Oh?
Because Jamie Bartlett did The Missing Crypto Queen. And Geoff White did this Lazarus Heist podcast, which, by the way, I still haven't listened to, but I'm adding it to my podcast list because I know that when Geoff was on promoting last season, I said, I got to listen to that podcast.
Yeah.
And I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to.
Yeah.
I'm going to listen to it right now. They said, or actually put it on my list this afternoon. So one of the things that they talked about that I hadn't heard of is this scam of superdollars. Have you heard of that?
No. Mm-mm.
That was a North Korean operation to print up really, really high quality fake $100 bills.
Oh, yeah, I have heard about that. And then they take them to China, I believe. Or somehow they flow through China. Yeah.
I wouldn't be the least bit surprised. That's the only land border they have. They got to flow somewhere.
Right.
This hacking that is involved in that's happening here and that they're talking about is all 100% financially motivated. Mm-hmm. It's just like most of the hacking that goes on. I was talking about this in last week's episode. Is the financial motivation is the main motivation of these attackers. 10, 15 years ago. Why did people do it? Money wasn't even on the list. Now it's pretty much the only thing on the list.
Yeah.
Because it's been so profitable and so well monetized.
Mm-hmm. And become a global operation.
And large organizations have finally organized themselves around this. It's organized crime is what it is.
Yep.
Cosmos Bank got hit for $14 million from ATMs in less than 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And now, those aren't all Cosmo ATM or Cosmo Bank ATMs, right? They can't be. They have to be like affiliate bank ATMs. They're just all the other ATMs that will connect to it because an ATM doesn't have to be run by a bank to access the funds in the bank.
Right.
So I love the description that was given in the interview, flash mob of crime.
Yeah.
Right? These guys were very busy for a little less than 3 hours and rounded up $14 million.
Right. Not a flash mob that's going to end up on YouTube.
Right. Yeah, exactly. For the 2.25 hours that they were working, that planning had been going on for months. I'd be really interested to know how much of that actually wound up at its ultimate destination. How much did they have to pay to the mules to get the money?
Right.
I'd like to know what a money mule makes, what percentage of the cut they get.
You'd also imagine that there could be a lot of skimming, right?
Right.
From the mules. You got a big wad of cash there that just, spewed out of an ATM.
Yeah. But these guys know how much the transactions for the cards they gave you. These guys could do the math. I wouldn't cross them.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
And if it is who the interviewees allegedly say it is, then yeah, they do have a global reach. I wouldn't do that. I would be 100% fastidious in my accounting.
Okay.
I cannot imagine going to North Korea for any reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not a place that's on my list, on my bucket list. There are a lot of places that are, but not there. Yeah. And I really can't imagine what living there is like. I'm impressed that Jean was dedicated enough to her reporting to go actually live there for a long enough period of time to get a feel of what it was like to live there. I think that's impressive.
It's quite an experience and opportunity, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the main points I'd like to make is that attribution is difficult by its very nature. Even if you know where something came from, you can't ever say 100% that this came from XYZ organization or from this country or for whatever. It's just, you can't do it. And these Lazarus Group hackers are making it much more difficult to trace it around. So even if they do move things through the U.S. and they fire off all those tripwires they were talking about in the interview, it doesn't matter to these guys. The U.S. is never going to get a hold of any of the people they've indicted for these things. They're just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Cryptocurrency targeting, that is a great thing that Geoff talks about. These cryptocurrency exchanges, they are in custody of billions of dollars worth of assets. And nobody knows who they are, which is really interesting, I think, that there's these kind of things out there where people go, yeah, sure, I'll give you some of my Bitcoin. You hold on to it. Yeah. Of course, that becomes a target for just about every kind of attacker. And we've had stories on this show about people applying for jobs at those places. Yeah. Which they talk about as well. It's a fascinating interview, and I am really looking forward to listening to this podcast, which I promise this time I will do.
All right, fair enough. All right, well, once again, the podcast is The Lazarus Heist, and they are just kicking off season 2 of that. Our thanks to Jean Lee from the Wilson Center and author and journalist Geoff White for taking the time to speak with us. We do appreciate it. We hope you check out their show. We want to thank all of you for listening, and of course, we want to thank our sponsors at KnowBe4. They are experts at enabling a fully integrated approach to security awareness training. That is our show. We'd like to thank you all for listening. Our thanks to Harbor Labs and the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute for their participation. You can learn more at harborlabs.com and isi.jhu.edu. The Hacking Humans podcast is proudly produced in Maryland at the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our senior producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Joe Kerrigan.
Thanks for listening. On a final note, our friends at N2K just launched T-, the only daily space podcast. Here's what you can expect from the show. Stay tuned for T-, ready to launch.
We are in a new space era.
T-, 20 seconds.
Advances in engineering and manufacturing have given us access to the heavens in ways that seemed almost unthinkable not that long ago. Private and public sector cooperation in the space industry is leading to innovation that sometimes feels like it's right out of a page of science fiction. But these achievements in space are real, and they're bringing incredible advances in defense, communications, infrastructure, engineering, and science to all of us right here on Earth. And they're happening fast. Join me I'm Maria Varmazes, and I'm the host of T-Minus, the daily space podcast for the space industry. Every day, you'll get the news and analysis you need to stay current on what's happening in space technology, business, and governance. To do that, I'll be talking with the people who are forging the path in this new space era, from industry leaders, technology experts and pioneers, to educators, policymakers, research organizations, and more. If you're a space professional looking to separate the signal from the noise and stay current on what's happening, this show is for you. Join me every day for T-Minus, the daily space industry podcast.
T-minus.
Available on all major podcast platforms.